Well, great. These magic words, when I have to tell you something about these magic words, because when we were asked to do this presentation, I said, Janelle, we've been asked by FFI to speak on 3 words about marriage, 3 phrases. And you said,
And right away, I don't know, I'm sure you told me what it was, but in my mind, all I heard was yes, no, maybe. And so like for like 2 weeks, I'm thinking yes, no, maybe. And then finally Ken's like, no, those are not the words.
So Janelle has a whole different talk. If you want to hear it, you check out her platform on yes, no, maybe.
No. Anyhow, we will speak on what you've asked.
Today we're going to talk about thank you, sorry, and please. And Janelle you had a great idea about starting off. So how you wanted to start off?
Well, let's start off in a joyful way, because I know we always feel better. It's uplifting when we say words of gratitude to one another. So do you want to start? Or I'll start. I'll start by saying what I'm thankful for Ken, and I wrote them down here. One thing that I'm really thankful for is I'm thankful that you make the bed every single morning. That really makes me happy because I walk into a clean room and that I just enjoy that. The other thing is I'm also thankful that you're a great conversationalist. Today we hosted a Valentine's party with like 25 kids and some moms, and Ken decided to hang out with the moms, and he just spent the whole time chatting, and I was just so thankful that he was there. And then thirdly, you take personal interest in each child. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So 3 things I'm grateful for you Janelle is I was trying to think of 3 things, and there was like the list had to get short and I didn't know which one to pick, but the one is that you're just so orderly. And the order that you create in our home also brings peace, and so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
The other thing was I gotta look at my notes. It was for those who know you, they know this to be true, your consistent joy. One of the things that, our emotions are up and down, but you consistently choose joy. And I know sometimes it's hard being in a homeschool family and just the stuff that's going on with the kids, but you choose it, and I'm very grateful. And the third thing is, guys, this is making me look bad.
He really is having a hard time coming up with some things. I don't take offense.
So this is true. This is true. At the end of the day, this is what I appreciate. Our chats.
Oh, okay.
It's just just how at the end of the day the kids go to bed and Janelle just sits down on the couch, or if we're in bed at the same time, we have this chat, and you just freely share with me.
Yeah, and he listens freely.
The whole day comes out, and I love that. I love hearing what's going on, and I love sharing too.
Well, thank you. Anyhow, so it doesn't, like, when we're sharing words of gratitude, it can be much simpler than that. It can just be like, hey, thank you so much for helping me with the groceries or whatever, but that was a little more lengthy.
So anyhow. 3 phrases that why are they important tonight?
Oh, yes, because these words are really crucial. And the reason why they are crucial is because they are virtuous. And we need to grow in virtue, because virtue is how we become holy. And when we become holy, that's how we get to heaven. And that is the goal. And the goal of our marriage is to get one another to heaven. So if we aren't practicing words of sorry, please, and thank you, then we are not going to be growing in virtue. And those are non-negotiables in terms of holiness.
So they're virtuous acts in terms of gratitude. I mean, that's a specific virtue, but to be able to say sorry, thank you, and please, each one requires virtue. And each one of those is also related to the cardinal virtues, which is justice, temperance, fortitude, and prudence. And so in some way, to be able to express one of these phrases, it also is drawing upon the strength of those cardinal virtues. And I wanted to mention at the beginning, what's a cardinal virtue? The cardinal virtues have every human virtue underneath one of those 4. So every virtue that you can think of, not talking about the theological virtues, but the human virtues, every good one is underneath one of those 4. And the cardinal virtues, the word cardinal comes from a Latin word, I believe it's cardo. But anyways, that word means hinge. So that means every good action that we do swings on one of those four virtues. And these expressions that we have in our marriage, thank you, sorry, and please, requires an exercise in some way of each one of those virtues. Now, we're not going to specifically explain how, but I thought it'd be good to be aware of that. And I want to draw your attention to, how do you feel about being around a virtuous person? What's your thoughts?
Oh, I love it. I love being around a virtuous person. It makes me want to be more virtuous. It really challenges me, especially if they're being more virtuous in areas where I'm really weak. I just think, like, if I see Ken like really trying hard at eating well, I'm like, oh, he's got such good discipline. He's got such strong temperance. I want that too. And it helps me. And so I feel like it's beautiful when you surround yourself with virtuous people, you can't help but want to be virtuous.
And one thing that came to my mind is that when you're around virtuous people or a virtuous person, you feel safe. And I have to say, I feel safe in our marriage. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm not worried by coming to you and sharing things. And that's what virtue does in relationships. It creates a safe space. And so we want to develop these virtues in our life. And I was speaking at a conference in the Philippines before COVID hit. It was a big conference. The main stage had 10 to 12,000 people at it. And I had after the keynote, I had a breakout session. So the breakout sessions were also very large too, like 2,000 to 5,000. So I think I had about 3,000 people in this one session. And I'm trying to explain why virtue just seems so beautiful and what it does to a relationship. And I thought of the example of a ballerina. When a ballerina knows who's taken ballet, they just move so effortlessly. And so I thought about talking about this, but I thought, wait a minute, there's like 3,000 people in front of me. There must be a ballerina in the crowd. So I said, is anyone here who's taken ballet for a number of years? And right away, a young lady put up her hand. She was in the front right. And it turned out she may have been a professional ballerina, but many years of experience. So I asked her to come on stage and to show everyone a move, a typical move that ballerinas do. I don't know, but she just did a beautiful, graceful move across the stage. And then I said, can you teach me now? So in front of all these thousands of people, she's taking my arms and she's moving and she's giving me instructions. And then I tried to execute the dance move that she showed me. And I have to say, it was a little awkward. And I think that is an important lesson for us, because when you see virtue exercised, it seems like a ballerina floating across the stage. It's effortless. It's beautiful. It's delightful. And that's a life of virtue. It's beautiful. It's delightful. And when you acquire the virtue, it's also ease, a life of ease. To acquire it, though, takes battle. And you had an interesting insight.
Well, because you were asking, would you want to dance with the ballerina? And I said, if I wasn't as good as a ballerina, I definitely would not want to dance with ballerina, because basically the point is, if you're not at the same level of virtue, it's awkward. The dance would be very awkward. And so it's important, like, we can admire this, but we need to work on our virtue in order to make the dance come together.
Yeah, so like
much more gracefully.
I probably would step on the ballerina's toes. And in the life of virtue, I'm married to a ballerina.
Okay, but let's just say the ballerina would not mind if you stepped on her toes.
But in marriage, you will realize, and we realize, there's different strengths between us. And so there sometimes is a bumping, a stepping on the toes. But that's normal when you're trying to grow in virtue. That's normal. And it leads to, what is the goal of virtue? And this is really important. This is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Virtue causes us to be like God. And that's the goal of virtue. I should also point out, what is virtue? It's a firm disposition towards the good. So two kind of key things that we have to remember. So these are habits that we acquire, firm disposition that moves us towards the good. And that the goal is to become like God. So these words, thank you, sorry, and please, why are they important? Well, you know what? There was these temporal blessings in marriage, and that's good. But the greater good is that it causes us to be like God. And that is what we need to keep focused in as we go through each one of these expressions. So we better go to.
Yeah, let's get started because we're going to run out of time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You want me to start?
Yeah, like how do we incorporate this into our marriage, into our family life?
Like practically.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, but can I just start off with something?
Yeah.
I just find it so interesting because thank you, sorry, and please. When do we first learn these key phrases? When we're children. It's like the very first thing that we're teaching our little kids who are beginning to talk. Say thank you, say please, and say sorry. It's really, these are fundamental lessons that we need to learn. And it's so interesting because as adults, it's like we've forgotten. We forgot how to do this, or we've gotten out of the practice, or it's gotten awkward. And just like the virtue that needs to be acquired or the muscle that needs to be worked, it's hard at first if you've lost the usage of it. But the more you work at it, the easier it will get. So how do we practice gratitude in our family? Well,
you're really good at this.
Okay, at first I have to put a disclaimer. Ken always builds me up. I feel like he makes me look way better than I am.
No, this is true.
Because you say I'm so virtuous, but really, I think
this is here's a great strength for you. This is like the gratitude.
Okay. Okay, I'll just share what we do in our family. Every day at supper time, we all go around and we say 3 things that we're thankful for. Every day. If we have company over, we still do it. And you know what? I like it because it kind of helps me. It's like a touch point with our children. We find out what's, and some of the kids, they don't really know, like the little ones, like, how do I say what I'm thankful for? We'll say, what made you happy today? What was your favorite part of the day? So just to kind of have some gratitude towards God for anything that's been good in your day today. And it's been beautiful because things that stand out to them, I totally forgot about that moment in the day. And I'm just grateful for that because I think we would miss out on so much if we wouldn't have that short little interaction at supper time.
And we are trying to develop this virtue within us as well. But when we do this at supper time, it's also developing it for the children. So give an example, like everyone participates. So Catherine is 3. No, Sarah's 3.5. Sarah's how old?
Yeah, Sarah's 3.5. Yeah.
So Sarah today participated, and I thought it was just classic of what she might say. When it came to her turn, imagine the little 3-year-old girl saying this: "Mommy and Daddy, get married, get a ring, kiss on lips."
It was so cute. That's exactly what she said.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad,
get married, get ring, kiss on lips.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful for that too.
So that's one thing that we do as like communally.
Yeah.
But then individually, I think it's important like to have individual prayer time. I would say that's one thing that we should encourage more with our children to do. Like when they get their first communion, we always give them a prayer journal. And in the journal, we ask them to start writing 3 things every single day that they're grateful for. And the reason that we do that is because for myself, that's been a practice that I've incorporated in my life since I was like 18 years old, and I just turned 40. So I've got like Rubbermaid bins full of journals, but
Rubbermaid bins full of journals highlighting what you're grateful for.
Right. Yeah.
I married up.
See, you don't have to keep.
But like it says, like what an incredible habit to develop.
Well, you're right. It is a habit. That's what it is. It is. And I'm just thankful, like, because I try to think of something new. Like, it's not always like, oh, thank you, Lord, for, a safe house or a safe place to live. Like, yeah, that'll come up every once in a while. But I try to make sure I do at least 5 different things every single day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of in conversation, I was a little bit more aware of this in the last couple of days because I knew we were going to talk about it. And I just noticed how we respond to each other. I was kind of analyzing our conversation and the kids, like when you do something for someone, the appropriate response is to say thank you. Mm-hmm. And because it's just, so it falls in underneath the virtue of justice because you're giving someone kind of what's due to them in some way. It's a kind, courteous thing. And I'm grateful to see this in our children. When we've asked them to pass something and we give it to them, there's a response.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just grateful for that. So if we're not used to saying this in our families, expressing our gratitude, well, it might be a little awkward at the beginning, but you grow into it and it becomes second nature. And I know many of you, I'm sure this is part of your culture at home. Scripture says, and I thought it worth noting that in First Thessalonians 5:18, it says, "Give thanks in all circumstances. This is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." So give thanks in all circumstances. So there's not a circumstance in our family life in which we cannot give thanks for something. Now, it doesn't mean that we're thankful for every circumstance, but it means that we can be thankful in the circumstance. There's a difference. We don't give thanks for evil. We don't give thanks for sin. We don't give thanks, but there's something in every circumstance that we can give thanks for. So even in marriage, even when marriages are struggling or there's discord a little bit, there's always something to give thanks to God. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this earlier. If we can express our thanksgiving to God, who is perfect, we most certainly will not express our thanksgiving to another person who is imperfect. So this thanksgiving that we express to those in our family members will be enhanced as we first give it to God. Mm-hmm. And it's also true for every other one.
Right. We were saying how the more we are accustomed to saying thank you, sorry, and please to God, the easier it will be to do that with the people in front of us as well. And really, when you look at our faith, like Jesus asks us to ask him, to say, please, Lord, I need you. I need and put forth our requests and to say thank you. Like even Christ, he said thank you at the Last Supper. And then lastly, the forgiveness at the sacrament of penance. Like that is a crucial part of our Catholicism.
And even Jesus giving thanks, think about when he gave thanks with his apostles. It's right before he enters the Passion.
Right.
He broke the bread, he gave thanks, yet he knows that there's a traitor at the table.
Mm-hmm. So in every circumstance, there's always something that we can be thankful for. So can I share one thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So if any of you are ever looking for an idea of how you can show gratitude to your spouse, this is something I think I heard about it from a friend of mine. She had gotten a journal, and every single day for an entire year, maybe some of you have done this before, for every single day, you mark the date and you write something that you're thankful for your spouse. And you do this secretly. You don't tell them. And then a year later, you wrap it up and you give them the book. And I think it's a special gift. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very special gift.
Anyhow, I think we're done on the gratitude point.
Sure. So we move on to sorry, the habit of asking for forgiveness. None of us are perfect. And so in our relationship with our spouse, there's going to be times when we hurt our spouse. Hopefully it's not intentionally, but often unintentionally. Mm-hmm. And when we become aware of either of those two times, an intentional act, which is much more serious, or an unintentional act, it's just to go to one spouse and say, honey, I'm sorry for this. And without that, how can you have healing? Mm-hmm. If you think about the relationship we have with God, how can we have healing with God without asking his forgiveness? In fact, the sacrament of reconciliation in the Catechism of the Catholic Church falls under the section healing. And so when we participate in that sacrament by going to God and asking his forgiveness, what happens? Healing. When we go to our spouse and say, Janelle, I'm sorry for speaking too long in church while everyone else was waiting in the car and I got caught up in those conversations. Truth happens. I'm sorry. Maybe something that's not so serious, but it can be very aggravating. I can understand that. Or something more serious. All of us have these moments in our marriage. You have them, we have them. And the tragic thing is, some couples have no memory of their spouse asking their forgiveness, saying sorry.
I was going to share a little story about somebody that I know personally. I've known them my whole life, and I have never heard this person say sorry. And as they get older, in their old age, I've seen how this lack or this inability to say sorry or to admit wrong has injured so many relationships in their family. And it's actually heartbreaking, because I feel like you were saying how to say sorry, to say, will you forgive me, how it restores healing or brings healing. I feel like so many relationships could be restored if this one person would just simply apologize and say sorry for their shortcomings or whatever. And the thing is, no one is perfect. It is a humbling act. It is a very humbling act to have to apologize. But you know what? Once we realize that we aren't perfect, it's okay. It's okay. And we have no, what's the word? We can't control how the other person responds. We just simply need to be faithful to what God is calling us to. And that is to ask for forgiveness when we have done wrong to somebody. And so that is our duty. We should and we must apologize and seek forgiveness.
And then we have the exercise of temperance in there, because humility falls underneath temperance. So you're humbling yourself before the other person. What is humility? It's simply the acknowledgement of truth.
Mm-hmm.
This is the truth of the situation. This is what I have done. And and when you hurt somebody or sin against them, you take something from them.
Mm-hmm.
You take their peace. You wound their dignity. And so it's just then also to go back to them and trying to restore that.
Mm-hmm.
You owe them in one way. You owe them. And isn't this, in one sense, what Jesus does on the cross? He pays the debt that we cannot pay.
The other thing I wanted to mention in terms when we say sorry, it also means, like, when we go to the confessional and we apologize to God, and we put before him all of our sins, it means that we are going to make an effort to not do that again. And that's the same in our relationships. When we say sorry for something, I'm not just saying in past, oh, sorry. It's like, sorry, I'm really going to try hard to not do that again.
Try really hard not to get caught up in conversation at church and leave the family in the suburban waiting for me. And to be mindful of that.
Okay.
I have no problem talking. There's so much more that could be said, but what happens if you've been wounded by your spouse and they don't say sorry? What do? This is way beyond, I think, a little video like this, but sometimes you can't control the other person. You can't really. It's their choice. Mm-hmm. So how can you respond to the hurt that they've done? This comes into the area of unforgiveness. I have a 7-part series on our YouTube channel that deals just with unforgiveness. There's so much to be said, but it would be worth your watch if that is something you're struggling with. Mm-hmm. How do you know if you're struggling with unforgiveness in the marriage? You're keeping score. You're bringing up past events continuously. You're lying awake at night with memories of injury.
Silent treatment.
Just off the top of my head, but there's a whole video on that. So we all deal with this to some degree. So it might be worth your watch there. Mm-hmm. 7-part series on unforgiveness on the YouTube channel. Moving on, should we to...
Okay, please. Yeah.
Please, could you go first?
Sure. Okay. So when we say please, I think sometimes, like, I think of the way I say please to my children. Sometimes it's almost like I want to manipulate them. Please pick up your clothes, or please, but the thing is, I think it's not, when we love somebody and when we do something out of virtue, it's not because we want to manipulate. It's because we want to, maybe because we need help, or we need their assistance, or because they should be doing something that they aren't doing. And so we're asking them to do that.
It's also a humbling act on our part when we say please. We're acknowledging that we need help, mm-hmm. In a kind way. And this is something that this should be second nature, friends. I would call this eternal common sense, to be able to go and always have that before the request.
To be polite. And I was thinking, even to say please, it can harden hearts. Because you just said, like, if you humble yourself, to come to somebody who is hard and to say, please, would you consider?
Okay, I'll give you an example of a hardened heart and how please softens it. And that's how you do that with me, with the kids. So the kids will come to me with a request. Dad says no. Janelle comes and says, please. And then she explains the situation, but she does it you do it in such a kind and sensitive way, and you say please, and I feel like I can't say no to their mother. So the kids, when they just came abruptly, they get to know when Janelle comes, their advocate, which brings up just a side note, of the importance of Our Lady. Because when our requests are placed in Our Lady's hands, she takes them and she goes to her son, Jesus, and says, please, here is this request. And she presents this request to her son as though it is her own request. And I just think Jesus, by the time he was born, already owed Mary 9 months of room and board. Mm-hmm. How can he say no to her? And so this is what Our Lady does with Jesus, I think, in her humility, going to him, saying please to another person, remembering their dignity and giving them the choice, goes a long way. Now, we did talk about how the relationship between thank you, sorry, and please. And is that where you're going?
Right. Yes, this is my last point. So basically, the relationship between the three, the better that we get at saying please, sorry, and thank you. And obviously, we might be better at doing one over the other. The easier, the better we get at one of them, the better we will get at the other ones as well. And I think, like we mentioned earlier, the better we get at saying sorry to God, saying please to God, placing a request. I think we often forget to ask him. Like when we have needs in our lives, why don't we ask him? He wants to help us. He's there listening and waiting for us to seek his help. So the better we get at saying sorry and please and thank you to him, the better we will get at doing all those three things here on earth to the people that he's placed in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And again, what's the goal of these virtuous acts, these exercises of virtue? It's to become like God.
Mm-hmm. And holiness. And like we were saying, like we want to be around a virtuous person. And so if we can be virtuous for our spouse, it will help them in turn to become virtuous.
Yeah. There is temporal blessings, but we must realize that the virtue that we gain is a great blessing to our spouse. It'll be because they'll feel safe in our presence. Mm-hmm. They'll be at ease. There'll be a peace in the home.
Mm-hmm. And for our children.
Our children. And maybe the last point is just about the children. How are our children going to learn this if they don't see it at home? And if we don't teach it to them, the world will try and teach it to them, and the world won't be nearly as merciful as mom and dad. 30 minutes. We're done.